Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the far and tenebrous interwebs. We are Adventuresome Reviews, and today we are reviewing The Fall of ERLON by Robert H. Fleming, which is a very authorly name, I must say. Yeah, it's just the Fleming, really. Well, he also threw in the H, which automatically makes it authorial. If you insist. I do insist. What's the synopsis? Oh, yeah, I should do that, shouldn't I? As empires burn, heroes must rise. Alyssa Lanes was once heiress to a mighty empire, but when her mother abandons the empire and her emperor father is defeated on the battlefield and sent into exile, the world she would rule collapses around her. As enemies converge on the capital, Alyssa must join with the last of the Empire's loyal soldiers to escape the evil that hunts her and her family. With the help of her father's generals, can Alyssa find the strength to fight for her people, or will a twist in the tide of the Empire's last war awaken an evil far greater than the enemy's blade? It's a military book. And tragically, the first half of this book was a chore to get through for me. Barely anything happened. It was a lot of traveling, which, while very authentic to medieval stories, is very boring. And it's so one of the characters is very much built around a chase sequence, but a lot of it is just that character walking, knowing, or running, knowing that they're being chased. There's just no actual narrative or physical conflict in the story. And on the other side of it, the other main character is part of political espionage. And that was so poorly handled. He does nothing. He just sits around and waits for something to hand itself over so he can pretend he did stuff. I really did not like this character. The character is called Rap, and he is another, he's a prince to one of Alyssa's warring enemy kingdoms. Yeah, and it's just, there were two instances throughout the book where Rap just completely destroyed any affection you might even potentially have for the character. And he wasn't a particularly likable character at the start, but not intentionally unlikable either. It's just spoiled royal who's obviously going to eventually... Well, it's not even that he's a spoiled royal, it's that he is not very bright. He is purposefully incompetent. Yes. The author made him purposefully incompetent. And it's not as in the author made him incompetent. No, the Rap knows he's being incompetent and decides to do it anyway. It's like the Rap storyline has a great deal of potential, right? Because he's he's poised for a grand character arc from arrogant, know-it-all teen, which is actually a really good description of his character. He knows better than his parents. His country is being run wrong, and to some extent he's right because his father is even worse. Right, and the book does make some slight mention of this. However, Rap mishandles every problem he encounters through his own headstrong idiocy, rather than clever enemies or understandable mistakes. His conflict is based upon him not being intelligent, which is a really bad character trait for a political espionage, for a political... whatever the word is, machinations. And it's really unfortunate because, like I said, he's setting up for a character arc, but character arcs where you go from kind of incompetent or villainous to hero, anti-hero, what have you, you either want the character to be likable or competent. Rap is neither. He's not even clever or sarcastic. He has little to no redeeming values. And it's just really unfortunate because he's also the one
who's kind of barreling toward an eventual hookup with Alyssa, simply because he's the only youngish man even near her age group. And once again, it kind of feels like the author is setting up a character arc for him.
Well, very much is, but it just, you don't even touch on it in the first book. It's just, and so there were no scenes for Rap or any part of his story that I actively enjoyed. It vacillated between him doing nothing and it being boring to him doing stuff wrong and not being intelligent. But if you like actually built in the concept that he's not a political person and he has to try and become political, that would have been a very interesting story. But he doesn't make the attempt. You don't see anything he does to maneuver in the political stratosphere or to try and find the traitors. It's just you see him doing nothing.
You don't even see him being incompetent because, like, if he... So,
well, you see him being incompetent.
I was kind of speaking of a different incompetence. So, Rap's storyline begins with him entering a church and getting a message from his god that there's a traitor among the royals, right? And that he must root out this traitor, which is actually a really good starter for Rap's story because Rap himself has no interest in politics. He is bored out of his mind by the political meetings that's going on at this. It's actually a peace summit, right?
Yes.
And so that's a really interesting start to the story because all of a sudden he's like, okay, I have a job here. It's suddenly interesting to me. Ooh, right? But he just spends the next couple weeks sitting actually in these political meetings doing nothing, watching, right? Whereas if he had actually shown him being incompetent, having him approach a character and very ham-fistedly trying to dig up information and failing, but trying really hard and doing his darn...
Actually doing something.
But failing and slowly learning how to actually investigate.
That would have been interesting and enjoyable and gave him like real conflict. As it is, the only major thing he does as part of the political espionage nonsense is get help.
Which is not terrible.
blindly, even knowing he should suspect anybody, blindly just choosing not to suspect the person he got for help. And that's one of the purposefully incompetent moments. He thinks of those, I should really suspect everybody, but I'm not going to suspect this person because it's too hard to think about.
That might be getting a little bit close to spoiler territory.
I actually don't really care.
Okay, this character he goes to help is so blatantly the traitor. You're spending his every single one of Rap's chapters smashing your head into the wall because it is such a blatant. You're the villain.
He's the only character Rap likes from all the.
No, Rap's story has 3 characters: Rap, his mother, and this character he decides to trust. There is literally no other character that is even thrown out as a red herring, pretty much. And it's just unfortunate. Rap's story would actually have benefited dramatically from more time being put into it, so you could actually get into...
it's not even just because Rap's story was 50% of that, of the book. The author did nothing with the time he allotted to it.
But Rap's story was also split into 2 halves. It's like the actual investigation of Rap's story, very little time, not very little, but most of Rap's chapters were spent about him dreaming going off to war rather than actually doing anything in the investigation.
I agree, but it's still that's the equivalent of the author doing nothing with those chapters.
Basically, Rap's story would have benefited from a lot more political espionage being input into it.
Yeah.
Because there's very little of that, and what little there was incompetent on Rap's part.
Once you get to the middle part of the book, it finally becomes interesting for me.
The story almost flips on a dime.
Because stuff actually happens. Elisa reaches her father's army, and it becomes like a gunpowder war story. And this is where the author actually works. The tactics used, the exploration of how the combat worked, all that was really well done for me. I really enjoyed it.
It's also where Alyssa met my favorite character from the book, and I don't remember his name, which is absolutely terrible.
The one general?
That's with the army.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he is her father, the Emperor's right-hand man, the best general currently alive on the battlefield, right? Because her father...
Her father's a legendary military tactician and almost conquered the continent.
He actually reminds me of Napoleon a lot, because he rose from nothing, became an emperor, is a verified genius that the entire continent is absolutely terrified of. They mailed him off onto an island, which is, very...
I actually imagine that's... Now that you pointed out that, I imagine that he is Napoleon in a fantasy
There's
world.
an entire coalition that was trying to take him out, and they were losing. It's very Napoleonic. And it's,
He even loses to the guys in the cold.
Yeah.
They just happen to have mammoths.
So anyway, and so this general is my favorite character because he's this world-renowned general. He's second in command, and he is doubting every move that he makes, but at the same time, he's putting on this very confident front, and he's making these decisions, and he's also, to some extent, guilty. He was the fabricator of the plan that got her father defeated. And so it was just a really interesting character, right?
Yeah. He is the only, properly interesting character in the story. Eliza, I don't like calling her Eliza because that's something with an A.
Yeah.
But Eliza or Elisa.
Elissa, something like that.
She's your standard female protagonist. Goes training montage, learns how to fight the sword, becomes an inspirational model, is starting to learn to become a general, or at least you imagine she will because of her pedigree and where she is in the fact that she's in the middle of a war, and that's more or less it.
I would have actually liked her to do a little bit more.
Agreed.
Alyssa,
she does a little bit in the second half, but again, she does not do a lot in the story. She's just not unlikable.
Yeah, I want something I like and kind of dislike. Because
it's believable for her not to do anything because she wasn't raised to be a military tactician. It's
95% of her in the book, it's just her standing around looking pretty and giving the soldiers something to fight for, which is at once kind of accurate, right? But also I kept wanting her to walk to one of the more experienced generals around her, or just somebody think, how do I help? Start teaching me how to be useful, right? And she already can shoot muskets and yada yada. She has some basic training, and she's only 14.
And she gets better as the story progresses.
And so, which is actually really nice. And never does she irritate me.
Agreed.
Right? It's just, I wish she would be a little more proactive in being helpful.
Yeah, but after that 50% of the point, you get to the war story, and it becomes a question for Lisa. How do we save my country? How do we turn away this collapsing war? And there's other stuff that happens that I'm not going to get into because that is spoilers for the good part of the book.
Can we? So something happens with her father. Can we tell them about that? Because that's something I didn't really like.
Talking about the ending?
Sorta, yes. I'm not talking about the king talking to the father, because that's very, very...
I wouldn't, just because that's part of the good part of the book.
Okay.
And so you have a major world narrative-changing event at the midway point, so it feels like the first half of the book is just preamble and setup and prologue, and then the second half of the book is where they actually have a goal and a destination and a conflict the reader can interact with, and the characters can interact with and change and affect. And that's where the story becomes interesting for me.
Yeah.
Even Rap's side, as he's being incompetent and terrible, he's actively doing stuff finally. And you want him to be successful.
Yeah, because once again, you want him to be successful and competent, because that's building into the character arc, right?
Yeah. And
it's, once again, it's just unfortunate because you don't want to spend any time on Rap. And it's, once again, it's just, I actually feel like throughout the first half of the book, the author may have benefited from taking time off Alyssa, and giving it to Rap just to spend more time on the espionage, because that's what was interesting where the things were happening and the most potential for character interaction and
Again, I don't think that would be
decision-making.
the case because he didn't do anything with the time he had.
I
So
guess.
giving him more time would just give him more time to do nothing.
Yeah, just Alyssa in the first half of the book spent a lot of time twiddling her thumbs and kind of having chit chats with her caretaker, and which is just a lot of nothing.
Yeah, and they're trying to build, and also tries to get you interested in the caretaker's history, but there's only so many stuff it can be for the caretaker's character history to be, and it's tragedy. So you're not particularly interested because you
That
know
being said,
what
the
it is.
caretaker was one of the strongest characters.
Agreed. It's just one of the motivations to keep reading doesn't actually interest me for him.
So something the author does do well, because I feel we're ragging on him a bunch, and it doesn't really deserve this much loathing and vitriol, is the gods, and I don't really think they're gods, but you have these kind of great spirits who appear to Alyssa every so often, and they're very mysterious, and I actually really like these scenes because I found them interesting, and they suggested a larger game was afoot, and the game afoot is already a war between nations.
Yeah, the larger game of foot aspect I like. The actual interactions I didn't like because there was about a bunch of, ooh, mysterious danger is coming, disappear.
I suppose, but you have the good god and the evil god, and they're kind of guides. They're like spiritual guides almost.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed this go-abouts because we so rarely get the evil guys with a spiritual guide telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And so it was a really nice kind of cosmic, there we go, ha ha ha.
That would have been an interesting story.
I want to come up with a joke, but nothing really comes to mind. So, cosmic forces butting heads and maneuvering pawns around. That was very enjoyable to me.
I agree. I wouldn't say very enjoyable, but I did like that aspect. It added some nice nuance to the narrative. And the fact that the gods are working towards the same goal, it's just they're on different sides or different methods isn't neat as well.
Yeah.
I think that's more or less everything I have to say about the book.
At least nothing that's not delving into deep and terrible spoilers, which is unfortunate. Yeah.
So I would have given this book about 3 stars, maybe 2.5 if I'm feeling cruel for the day. It was a chore to get through the first half.
Yeah, but the second half was significantly better.
Yeah,
probably
Eliza's story in the second half was significantly better. Rap's was slightly better, but still made me want to slap him.
Yeah, but it's like other characters also. It's like there's another character that we didn't even mention who was also really enjoyable.
You're right. I did forget about him slightly. I did really enjoy his entire narrative.
Okay, so Rap's father is currently running an incredibly incompetent war against one of the remaining forces of Alyssa's empire. And with Rap's father, there is a second general. And this general is competent down to his boots, pretty much. Not quite, but...
Not a genius, but like someone who could actually win your war if you put him in charge.
Right. And he is bashing his head into the wall throughout every chapter he's going on, because he says, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And Rap's father is just incompetent, arrogant, and throughout all this, and so through this secondary general's perspective, you see just how incompetent and how aggravating Rap's father is, and which actually makes you really like this second general. And so you have his character arc and narrative. It's kind of like my favorite of the story, because he eventually
had the most interesting, like from start to end, he had the most consistent and interesting narrative, the most interesting situations, and his powerlessness in the first half was really well structured because it was his powerlessness versus his competence, and the fact that
And he's like, despite his powerlessness, he manages to do, like, nothing terribly overt, but he manages to run his company well and get minor things done as much as he can while being under the command of a significantly more incompetent general.
Yeah. And just as it progressed into the second half, he had a really enjoyable narrative there as well, and narrative situation.
So yeah, his story is the thing the author did best, and it really was very enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'd probably give it 3 stars, 3.5 after you get to the second half.
That's probably fair. Toodaloo, goodbye, au revoir.
That being said, I might actually, I'm interested in reading book 2 simply because
I have no interest in reading
but
book.
there's like the gunpowder and the muskets. Like this is
There are better gunpowder.
okay. There are significantly better, but there are so few of them. This is a criminally underexplored realm of fantasy.
It's starting to get more explored though, slowly.
Yes, but it's like the actual kind of musket warfare was really well handled, and it was just another one of the really good parts of the book.
Yeah.
But anyway, Doodles. Fare thee well, our future friends.